several reasons, of course. And the first reason is early diagnosis. Actually making the diagnosis either because it was done by screening, or more importantly, having the patient able to present with early symptoms. So the first piece is early diagnosis. And the second piece, of course, is getting the right diagnosis. You'll hear from Dr. Lee about the importance of making that diagnosis even within one cancer type. So lung cancer is no longer one cancer, it's multiple cancers. So it's early diagnosis, then getting the right diagnosis, and then, of course, the right access to treatment. And that treatment can be surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, all of the known treatments. But within those treatments, we have learned to do them well and to do them safely. I think you'll find that the Chinese surgeons are very capable surgeons. They're very able to do it. But what they need to do or be able to do is to see the patient earlier. And then we can have Dr. Lee talk about the multiple combinations of treatment and the new treatment. So the answer to your question is many different aspects. Most importantly, initially, is early diagnosis, prevention, and screening. Well, we have to be very careful because the United States has the best cancer care in the world, but it is not available to everybody. We have a big problem about access because of the way in which it's financed. And we are, I think, Dr. Lee and I, embarrassed by the fact that not everyone can have access to the care we provide. China, on the other hand, has a huge demand for cancer care. So while they may have greater access, they don't have access to all of the things we have. So we have the same problem for different reasons.
Yeah, I think China's constantly evolving. Just over a decade or two ago, the 5-year survival was only about 20%. But the recent publications in Lancet Global Health had shown a 5-year survival of 41%. So that's doubled just in the last decade or so. And this is still continues to evolve with constant healthcare reform and the urbanization of the Chinese population. You still see a lot of disparity between Chinese patients all across the country, and with varying levels of access to early detection, prevention, as well as treatment. So I do think that is a constantly moving number. The 5-year survival in the United States is approaching 70%. 69% was the latest figure published. And I second Sir Murray's point that within this 69%, there's actually a huge variation in terms of patient access to care. At Memorial Sloan Kettering, our statistics is really the best in the nation, but it's not access. The access is not for all, and therefore we are constantly trying to expand our access to all patients across America as well as internationally. So it's a problem, but it's constantly evolving, and by working together, we hope to find better solutions for patients.
The other thing we want to try to do is to try to limit the cost of care. The cost of care in the United States is more than anywhere else in the world. We spend more per capita, $10,000 on every person, and we don't have a better life expectancy than someone in Cuba. So we have a huge problem about the cost of care. And while I say cost, it's really not so much cost is the way we try to maximize the charges to not just the patient, but the tests, the extra tests we do, the tests that are not indicated. So China has this wonderful challenge to take the best that we have to offer, but don't take it all because it's not worth it. Dr. Lee will be the better to answer the key researchers, but it's very important to emphasize it's not just the research. We are very committed to everything from early diagnosis, and we're very committed to educate the next generation of physicians. So it's the whole piece of research. In terms of new and innovative research, you're talking to the right person, and Dr. Lee.
Yeah, so our overarching research goal is to, in terms of treatment, to bring the right treatment to the right patient at the right time. And that is the definition of precision medicine. And we have an institutional level tumor sequencing assay that's FDA approved. It was actually the first to be FDA approved for a next generation sequencing assay in the United States. That's the MSK Impact. Every patient who walks in the door gets their tumor sequenced molecularly, and then we can not only give standard treatment, but also the next generation of cutting-edge treatments designed and tailored to the right patient. And that opens doors to many new forms of targeted and immunotherapies. In terms of, we are also doing blood tests now, developing MSK Access, which is a circulating tumor DNA next generation sequencing assay to complement the tissue, because blood is capturing the tumor systemically and has potential to address some of these issues of intratumoral heterogeneity, where a particular tissue biopsy at a tumor site may not be representative of the entire cancer. It could be heterogeneous. So having liquid biopsy is one way to address this. This is another layer onto getting more precise treatment for the right patient at the right time.
We spoke a little bit about this morning when Prime Minister Rudd said one of the problems is that the rural people don't have access. But that problem's going to go away because we're going to take the diagnosis to the patient, not make the patient come to the diagnosis. At the moment, that's taking the ultrasound machine or the CT or the mammogram to the patient. But it will soon be just taking a blood sample or taking a biopsy, and that can be analyzed in Beijing or Guangzhou, it doesn't matter. And the result can be reported on your telephone within minutes. So we're going to take the diagnosis. The other advantage of that, of course, is it means you don't bring people unnecessarily to line up in the huge clinic to be seen. So there are advantages. The second advantage, it's not just for new diagnosis, the molecular, it's to make the right diagnosis so people don't get the right treatment. The most expensive treatment is the wrong treatment. If you give someone the wrong treatment, that's very expensive.
I agree. And in parallel to our precision medicine treatment, we are also having a precision interception prevention program, hoping to prevent the many cancers and catching them early in its pre-malignant forms. So there are various new tools being developed as we speak. So the prevention and treatment, they must go hand in hand. And ultimately, our aim is to cure cancer, but we do believe precision is the path that will help us get there.
And we'll, by these techniques, identify families in which you can identify their greater risk of a particular cancer. So then you can focus on the family very early in the course of their disease. You begin to screen the people at greater risk. You have a huge problem with cigarette smoking. You have a significant problem with pollution. So you begin to screen the people who are heavy cigarette smokers. Now, it'd be much better for them to stop, but you start looking, or you start looking for families at risk of a particular cancer. And so you can take the knowledge that we have about what populations are at risk. So the first thing is to bring the people at greatest risk to be screened.
And so the flip side is you have a huge population, so the difference you can make, but with an effective screening program, will be even bigger. Not necessarily more expensive. A publication just a couple of years ago from Professor Dennis Loh at Chinese University of Hong Kong had this is in the New England Journal of Medicine, found just by screening for EBV virus, Epstein-Barr virus, you can, in the blood, through liquid biopsy, you could potentially catch nasopharyngeal carcinomas a lot earlier and potentially curing them.
And we never had vaccines before, and now we have vaccines against cervical cancer in women. That is hugely cost effective, that you can prevent that event. Not just because the patient doesn't get sick, but that means that patient goes on to be a healthy mother, goes on to look after the children, goes on to have a job. Very hard to get the politicians in both countries to think 10 years ahead, not 10 minutes ahead. Well, you don't just have to educate the doctors. There's no reason not to educate nurses or practitioners in the community that can do a lot that the physicians. You don't need a physician to do everything. And that would be, it's perhaps not correct, but the concept of the barefoot doctor that was original is actually a good idea. They're not actually a doctor, but they are equally able to recognize things. The second part, of course, which you're now seeing, if you look at all the money we spend for healthcare, we spend an awful lot on treatment. We spend much less than many countries on the social care, the good nutrition, the education, the avoidance of cigarette smoking. So you want the investment not just to be on the treatment, but also on the social factors that cause cancer. We always say that the United States spends more per head of population on healthcare, but if you combine healthcare and social care, actually countries like Switzerland and France spend more than we do, but they have better outcomes, not just because of the treatment.
One of our initiatives at MSK is to harness the new technology to solve those problems due to geographic barriers and healthcare systems. So telemedicine, for example, can reach the rural areas just with your smartphone or through the computer screen and through WeChat, social media. So we could provide valuable information to patients, their families, as well as their doctors and care providers through technology. MSK already does that in America. We send out our research findings to doctors all across America. We also have patient-based articles to summarize the latest in treatment and prevention from Memorial Sloan Kettering, and they are all based on peer-reviewed scientific high-impact publications, but tailored to physicians and patients. Now we have the opportunity to work with China to translate them into Chinese, and through social media distribute these findings to patients and physicians in China, including the rural areas. And this is an attempt to improve the quality of care globally on cancer. So I do think education, whether it's patient education or physician-to-physician education, is very, very important. In fact, it's one of our three main foundational pillars for our mission. If you look at the MSK logo, which is not on this wall, but it's looks like a fishbone. It's got three horizontal lines, bars, and then you've got the arrow. Arrow is to cure cancer, but the three bars represent patient care, research, and education.
You will be able to read all these through your WeChat account sooner or later.
Has done already in the last few years is accelerating the development of new cancer treatments for American patients. It's led some of the pivotal international trials, and due to the scale of the Chinese population and the scale of its operation in investing in precision medicine. It's accelerated that pace by many, many years, and many of those trials through Chinese contribution led to US FDA approval, thus saving American lives. And conversely, the Chinese government also had a recent policy changes over the last year or two since joining the International Council of Harmonization. That's the ICH, the global regulatory body for clinical trials. And for the first time, they are accepting foreign clinical data in China for approval in the China market without mandating another 10, 15-year process for drug development. And consequently, the cervical cancer vaccine that Sir Murray had mentioned earlier, one of them is called Gardasil 9, produced by Merck in America. It's called MSD here. And it took 9 days to get approved instead of 10, 15 years. So 9 days for Gardasil 9 was a headline, and you can imagine the number of Chinese lives saved through this US-China cooperation. American vaccine, American company, Chinese life saved through the cooperation on a policy level. So there's so much synergy between US and China, and I have hope that with those two largest economies of the world working together, we may find the cure for all cancer within my lifetime. And I actually want it quicker in my patient's lifetime. So I think the MSK-CTONG collaboration is an example of such synergy in accelerating our quest for the cure of cancer. I can actually see the cure of cancer. It's not very clear. It's kind of very far away. And there's a bit of haziness in between. There's maybe some waves you have to overcome. But we're sailing towards that direction. And there is that promised land over there. With the US and China working together, it'll turbocharge the ship and get us there, remove barriers and get us there quicker in this lifetime. That's what matters to me, and that's what matters to my patients.
The other attractive thing, of course, is that this cooperation is a cooperation predominantly between physicians looking to solve a problem that they see in their own families, whether they're Chinese or Americans. And it doesn't require the government to agree, either government. It's something that it's hard to be against, trying to solve the problem of cancer. So it gets away from all of the concerns about many of the other problems that we are challenged by.